right, 9 minutes before 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. You know, there's no getting around it, Robin. We all have our trials and tribulations in this lifetime. You ever look at somebody and say, oh my gosh, they've got $10 million. What troubles could they possibly have? Well, trust me, they got problems. Everybody's got it. It's part of, I guess, the way it's supposed to be. And there's probably nothing harder to deal with than the death of somebody you love, unless that death is suicide. That's got to be the hardest. Joanne Harpel, I hope I said her name right, Robin, is on the phone. She's an attorney. She's a master of philosophy, and she's a longtime survivor of her brother's suicide. And I like the way that's phrased, because that is exactly what it is when you go through this. She's the president of Coping After Suicide, and she's going to give us some tips on how to handle specific situations, not just the challenges that she's had to go through. Good morning, Joanne. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you.
Where are you right now?
I'm in New York City, Midtown Manhattan.
Are you on a speakerphone, Joanne?
I'm on a headset. You want me to take it off the headset?
It's a little muffled, yeah.
Sure. Is that better?
Oh my gosh,
Sure.
that's so much better. Yes, thank you, Joanne.
Okay.
So you're in the city,
course.
and you're in New York City?
I am.
All right. When did your brother commit suicide?
In this July, it'll be 25 years ago. He was 26 years old and had no prior history of any kind of mental health problem at all until he developed bipolar disorder in his mid-20s. It can be an adult-onset illness, and that's what happened to him. And we tried really hard to get him the best help we could, but we ran out of time. And less than a year after being diagnosed, he took his own life.
Wow. My question may seem insensitive, and I apologize if it is, but how close were the two of you? Not just in age, but I mean, I'm guessing you were very close.
We were very close. We were 2.5 years apart in age, but we're very, very close. And it was really, his death was a complete shock to me and really changed the course of the rest of my life in many ways.
I'm guessing a lot of the changes that you just referred to happened early on, or am I wrong about that?
So when he died, I was a corporate lawyer and was one of those people who my whole life had been told you're going to be a lawyer, and that's what I did. And after he died, I really took stock of my life and reassessed what was important to me and made a major shift in my career. And I've now spent the last 20 years as a professional helping other families and communities and schools and workplaces cope with the aftermath of suicide.
Wow. Was he was very young, so I don't know if this is a fair question, but was he already established in a career path?
He was just at the very beginning. He was an honors graduate at Yale, had gone on to Harvard Law School, was married to his college sweetheart, had just started a job as a tax attorney in a large law firm out on the West Coast. But he was really too sick to be able to launch that career successfully. So he worked just for a couple of months and then took a leave of absence and took his life while he was on that leave.
How helpful is it, if at all? How helpful is it, with my little caveat there, if at all, to understand why somebody kills themselves? I've often thought when people try to struggle with the why, that it might not even help if they even know the why. Like with Robin Williams, for example, we use somebody everybody knows. Everybody said, why did he kill himself? And then they tried to explain why. When I say they, I mean, like entertainment news, etc. And I don't know that it helped.
I have worked with thousands of people over 20 years who've lost someone to suicide, and I've never met a single one yet who wasn't grappling with that question why. It seems to be really a universal feature of coping with a suicide loss. And some people grapple with it for the rest of their lives, and other people grapple with it only very briefly. But what I usually try to help people understand is that suicide is incredibly complicated and is almost always the result of many different factors that come together. But that fundamentally, what we know from the research is that almost everyone who takes their own life has some kind of serious underlying psychiatric vulnerability at the time of their death, whether that's depression or bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, substance abuse. And it's that together with many other factors, in some cases going back to childhood, in other cases more current stressors in their lives that exceed their ability to cope.
You created a toolkit for schools, and hopefully that when this toolkit was distributed and suicide was trying to be explained to the students, if there was at least one student that was contemplating suicide, maybe that turned their life around where they did not.
Certainly the hope is that when a suicide occurs in a community, in this case a school community, the adults in that community can help students recognize risk factors and warning signs either in themselves or in their friends and encourage them to get help. Because one thing that we do know is that untreated or undertreated depression and other mental illness is a huge risk factor for suicide. And whether it's a teenager or an adult, you can have all kinds of things going well in your life and still have diabetes, right? The same way you can have all kinds of other things going well in your life and still have depression or still have bipolar disorder or still have a substance abuse issue. And so what we try to do with the toolkit and in my work generally is to help people understand what to look for and then how to get help.
How do you help the survivors with their guilt for kicking themselves for not recognizing anything?
So sometimes there's nothing to recognize. Sometimes people who are suicidal don't show any overt warning signs that can be identified, and other times the signs only make sense, tragically, only make sense in retrospect. And so one of the things I try to encourage people to remember is that suicide is very complicated and it occurs in the context of someone's entire life. And no one kills themselves just because they had an argument with their spouse or just because they were fired. Yeah. It's much, much more complex than that.
Robert asked about the guilt that you might feel because you didn't notice something. What about the guilt you might feel as a survivor when you want to get back to a normal life, when you want to start having fun again? That to me, I would feel guilty. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to feel guilty for living your own life, but is that common?
It's extremely common. Most people, as they grieve a suicide loss, sort of toggle back and forth between deep grief and then small steps, incremental steps to integrate the loss into their lives in a way that enables them to feel like themselves again. And then often will feel that it's somehow a betrayal of their loved one if they go to the movies and don't think about it for a couple of hours, or if they laugh and have a good time. And that's often just a process that takes place over time.
Yeah. Joanne, thank you for this important subject matter. I apologize, it's such a short period of time. Do you have a website or a book that you can direct us to?
The best way for people to find me is on LinkedIn. It's Joanne, Joanne. The last name is Harpel, Harp like Papa, El, Coping After Suicide.
Okay, what was it called?
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Joanne, thank you for being on the show with us today.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
This is a Fox News alert. I'm Lillian Wu. At least one American service member killed in Syria.
U.S. military says 2 coalition troops died, 5 others wounded when a roadside bomb detonated outside the